Hi, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This is a show all about farmers markets. Whether you're a farmers market manager, a farmer, or a food producer selling at farmers markets, or just a curious farmers market shopper, this is the podcast for you. Our guest this week is Anastasia Plakias, co-founder and vice president of Brooklyn Grange Rooftop Farm, co-founder of City Growers, and author of The Farm on the Roof, What Brooklyn Grange Taught Us About Entrepreneurship, Community, and Growing a Sustainable Business. Anastasia is a native New Yorker and is dedicated to making the city that raised her a greener and more sustainable place to live. On today's episode, Anastasia fills us in on what it's like to grow food in an urban environment, collecting data and understanding return on investment, and not overworking your bees. Hi, I'm one of your hosts, Bridget Myers. I've spent years as an on-site farmers market manager, and I've done it all from pulling permits to vetting vendors.
And I'm your other host, Justine Marzoni-Mead, farmers market vendor, hot sauce maker, and event facilitator for the Intense Conference.
And I'm Kat Fields-White, Director of San Diego Markets, still an active farmers market manager and writer, and founder of Intense Business.
Welcome back to Tent Talk. This week we're joined by Anastasia Plakias, co-founder and vice president of the leading rooftop farming and intensive green roofing business in the U.S. Brooklyn Grange Rooftop Farm operates the world's largest rooftop soil farms, located on 2 roofs in New York City, and grows over 50,000 pounds of organically cultivated produce per year. Anastasia chronicled the incredible process of building these rooftop farms in her 2016 book, The Farm on the Roof, What Brooklyn Grange Taught Us About Entrepreneurship, Community, and Growing a Sustainable Business. In addition to her work at Brooklyn Grange, Anastasia is also the co-founder of the nonprofit City Growers, which allows city kids the opportunity to explore the natural world and learn where our food comes from. We are honored to have Anastasia as a keynote speaker at the 2019 Intense Conference in February.
Hey, it's Justine and Kat and Bridget.
Hello.
Hi guys, how are you?
Good.
How are you?
Good, thanks. Great. Yeah, we are having a really rainy, gross day here. Missing California weather. Although, are you guys?
I think we might rather have yours right now.
Yeah.
Since we're really dry and we're on fire.
Yeah, I was going to say, does that affect the air quality where you are, or?
Actually, everybody I know is sniffling and sneezing, and I'm wondering if it's starting to affect us because there is a pretty big fire in LA, which is not all that far from us. So given wind conditions and things, luckily nothing is on fire in San Diego or Riverside County, at least yet. We're still crossing our fingers. But yeah, it may be affecting us a bit here.
Yeah, it's very dry and
very windy, which is scary.
0% humidity.
Yeah. The wind
So
is bad.
scary.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, very upsetting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, on a more positive note.
Anyways.
Here we go. So, I loved the book. It's such a pleasure to talk to you because I adored the Farm on the Roof book. So I'm hoping everybody out there in Tent Talk land is reading that now or will soon. So how, as a native New Yorker, I know some of these answers because I've read the book, but we're going to ask them anyway for the folks that have not, and kind of fill in the background. How, as a native New Yorker, did you become such an advocate for sustainable agriculture?
Well, I was really fortunate growing up in New York City that I personally had access to some of the best foods in the world. And I think it was the realization upon going to college in the Hudson Valley where, so much of New York City's fresh food comes from, recognizing that, it was a level of privilege that I was enjoying that was not accessible to all members of our community. And that the vast majority of our community is eating institutional food that's shipped from tens of thousands of miles away. Sorry, that the vast majority of our community is eating food that's shipped from really long distances to which they have no connection, from purveyors who are not part of their local economy. And this was really a sort of a huge moment for me in shaping my desire to really change that food system.
That's great. So did you get into farming not up on the roof of large buildings before you progressed to the Brooklyn Grange project?
Well, other than growing a couple lima beans as part of a second grade science project on my windowsill growing up, I really had no experience gardening or farming until building a couple small gardens with some pals who owned a restaurant in Brooklyn called Roberta's. We built these gardens on top of shipping containers in the backyard of their restaurants. So I've actually always been a weird, elevated grower.
Yeah, that's great. So those shipping container gardens, they were also dirt? Because one of the other questions is, whose idea was it to put actual farms with acres and acres of dirt on big city roofs versus a lot of times when you see rooftop garden information or projects, it's hydroponics.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we were farming in soil and, in this tiny little space, which was really inefficient. And so when I actually saw an article about my now business partner, Ben Flanner, who had built the first sort of commercial scale rooftop farm called Eagle Street in 2009. And he had 6,000 square feet or 600 square meters. And I remember thinking, wow, he has so much space. For a New Yorker, that seemed like, just a massive amount of space in which to grow. Of course, now looking back, we realize just how constrained that is and that, there's really no way to create a fiscally sustainable commercial farming business in that little space. But at the time, it seemed like quite a bit. And it was really Ben's idea to just take this green roof model and adapt it to farming. He saw a picture of a green roof, a couple that was building green roofs, and they put a little herb garden on their own personal green roof at home. And he thought, why not just scale that up and plant the entire green roof out with vegetables?
Yeah, so if you're doing a green roof, why not take the food, not lawns concept there, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How many acres does Brooklyn Grange have?
So our two existing rooftops are 2.5 acres, and we're adding another site in southern Brooklyn that is itself 2.5 acres.
Oh, that's great.
So, so we're doubling our acreage, and on that space, we produce probably 70,000 pounds of produce a year.
Wow, that's amazing. So how long did it take to secure the location, get it up and running? Who in the world agreed to underwrite insurance on this project?
The insurance piece of it is always everybody's big concern. It's less of a challenge than you would think. Insurance companies are happy to write you a policy if you're willing to pay for it. The landlord piece of this was really a challenge. There are a couple reasons that convincing a landlord to let you dump over 1 million pounds of soil on the roof is going to be a hard sell. Mm-hmm. And it's the same. It's true. So here's the thing. Green roofs have tremendous environmental benefits and provide incredible ecosystem services like reducing combined sewage overflow, reducing urban heat island effect, creating habitat for wildlife and migratory and native pollinators. But none of that is really a landlord's primary concern, right? Their primary concern is their bottom line.
Sure.
And everybody tries to argue, but what about the energy savings that come with green roofs? They reduce the heating and cooling needs of the buildings. The problem for a New York City landlord with that is that they're not paying those costs.
Right, exactly. That's not the landlord's issue. That's other tenants.
Mm-hmm. That's tenants. And moreover, they're marking those services up for the tenants.
Yeah.
Right.
Costing them opportunities to create revenue in their spaces if that's the case. But, at the end of the day, what we've realized is this. New Yorkers are hungry, like urbanites all over the world, for access to green space, for a connection to their food system, and for some sense of autonomy in the food choices that they make every day. And by creating space in their building for urban farming and for the community to gather to learn, and we have a wonderful workshop program. We have yoga on Monday nights. This added so much energy to their building. It added value. Landlords were finding that it was easier to entice tenants who were otherwise looking only at spaces in Manhattan to come across the river.
Good. Makes sense.
If there's a farm on the roof. So that was really our big selling point, because at the end of the day, the rent that we're able to offer per square foot is not, the $30, $40 per square foot that landlords are receiving for indoor rent. So, when they look at the numbers, it's, they're not as interested in it from a financial standpoint until they realize that we actually, not only are we paying for the the actual square footage that we're leasing from them on the roof, but we're increasing the value of that indoor real estate as well.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And even though you're not paying inside rent, I mean, you're paying rent on a space that probably wasn't in the original pro forma as a rentable space. So they are getting some bump on rent. But then I totally see that it would make sense that for them, when you're competing with other landlords, this is something that's cooler, especially in Brooklyn, than just a building with an ordinary roof. And the other thing that I got from your book that I really liked, and one of the reasons that we wanted you to come to Intense and talk to you on Tent Talk is our whole thing at Intense is not to teach people to install an irrigation system or to convert from conventional to organic. We know there's a lot of great farm conferences for that. Our thing is to be sure that we teach small farmers and food makers that their passion projects should be treated like a business so that they can be financially sustainable, so they can make a profit. And I noticed throughout the book at Brooklyn Grange, you've always insisted that as new projects come online, whether it's events or farmers markets or what have you, that those projects have to add to the overall bottom line, that they can't just be, they're not hobbies, it's a business. So how'd you come to that conclusion? Why do you think that's important?
Oh my gosh. I mean, we run Brooklyn Grange as a pennies business, and we've done that, even as our revenues have doubled, tripled, quadrupled over the years. We've never stopped focusing on the bottom line, on the margins. It's all about the margins and how healthy are the margins. And that's incredibly important because having that data and knowing where you're actually garnering a return, it teaches you where to invest your energies. And it also allows you to invest in the mission that you care about. Everybody says, right, yeah, find the bottom line, but I really want to give back to the community, or I really want to be an ecologically sustainable business. Fine, great, you can want all those things, but if you're bankrupt, guess what? You're not going to realize any of those things. So, by really focusing on which crops are the most valuable, meaning, what are the highest yielding, quickest turnaround, highest density crops that allow us to garner the greatest dollar value per square foot over the course of the year from our field, then we're able to create more jobs and pay our farmers a better hourly rate. If we find that we're able to create a really healthy margin by not just designing and installing green spaces for developers and institutional partners and private landowners all over the city, but also by maintaining them, that we get this great recurring revenue, and that allows us to create more sustainable employment opportunities. Now we're finding that our revenue streams are really triple bottom line revenue streams, but we can't know that unless we know exactly how profitable they are.
That's great.
I ask any, if you really want to learn about financial sustainabridge and ecological sustainability, find somebody who lived through the Depression.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. We were just, Bridget and I were both just in Europe and going to farmers markets there and going to see farms, and then just the general populace and the way they buy food and use food. Those are cultures that have been through devastating wars and thus really culture-wide poverty in not that long ago, and they're just so much less wasteful than we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Same thing with the generation here that's gone through the Depression. They're not buying food and throwing it away. They're using all of the food. They're using all the parts and pieces of, whether it's vegetables or animals. It's really different.
It's a really different mindset. And that's the way we think all the time because, and I think it's the way farmers think. So here's another thing about waste. We're always thinking about the waste. So when we think about waste, we think about, the scraps on our plate that we're scraping into the trash, or we think about, the peel of the orange that we're not eating. Or, maybe the whole orange. We've all had that experience where you open a piece of citrus fruit and it's dry and, you're like, oh, this is not good. And you throw it in the compost. But what we're thinking about as farmers is not just the waste product, but the energy that went into creating the product in the first place.
Yeah, that's so smart.
Right? And I think that's really unique to farmers. We're thinking about the gallons and gallons of water that we're dumping down the drain when we throw away that orange. And I'll tell you, I have so many weird bottles of booze with like, a third of a third of the bottle of booze is filled, and then there's like fruit floating in it. And my husband is like, "What is this weird fruit?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it was a dry orange, but I didn't want to throw it away because that's 14 gallons of water that went into growing that orange."
We can't waste it.
This is the way we think as farmers, and I think that if we can share that with our community, I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I think that's really a gift that we give when we sell at farmers markets. I know when we sell at farmers markets, we let people know if they're buying a really ripe heirloom tomato, store that shoulder side down, because it's going to ripen shoulders last, and by storing it shoulder side down, it's going to get you 3 extra days before you start finding that it's rotting on the bottom and have to cut away part of it. We want people to enjoy every last bit of that tomato because we know how much energy went into growing it, and not just water, but our own sweat,
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So you guys, Brooklyn Grange grows a lot of produce. So speaking of not wasting anything, where is that produce going? Like how much is sold at farmers markets versus CSA and wholesale? What are you doing with what you're growing there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the numbers quite for 2018, and we did grow farmers markets this past season just a bit, but less than 30% of our produce is distributed via CSA and markets. The vast majority is sold wholesale because, here in New York City, it's just a really efficient sales channel for us. And because when you're growing up on a roof, efficiency is key.
Yeah.
We have to get all that product down in a freight elevator.
Yeah. A little different than loading in the back of a truck and driving away.
A little different.
Yeah.
And fighting New York City traffic to get it anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different, but it's interesting because that less than 30% number I quoted you is a revenue figure. And I actually have not done the math recently on the pounds. But it would be interesting to look at that because, when we talk about our wholesale channels versus our markets and CSA, we're growing a wider variety of products for market and CSA than we are for our wholesale accounts. Maybe not a wider variety, but it's a different crop mix that we're putting out on our market table than we are putting on our wholesale price list. And oftentimes, it's the more calorie dense and heavier crop mix that's going out to market. So it would be interesting to see the discrepancy between. It's a number I plan on pulling for the conference for sure. The discrepancy between dollar amount and the actual sheer volume of food.
Yeah. Are you doing wholesale to restaurants and like smaller grocery markets, or what's your wholesale?
Right, yeah.
Both of those. Okay.
Yeah, small mom and pop grocers, a lot of restaurant accounts, and it's really crucial for our restaurant accounts that we're able to make 2 weekly deliveries because we're so local. Because, here in New York City, chefs have small kitchens with small walk-ins, so they're not able to fit a week's worth of produce in there.
Yeah, so that's probably really convenient to have you close by. But are you doing 2 seasonal farmers markets right now, or did you grow that? Okay.
We do, yeah. We just do 2. We will add one next season when we bring the new farm up online.
Yeah, I know there's a fair amount of farmers markets there where you are, so that's really great. Why did you choose the 2? You do Queens and Greenpoint, is that right?
Yeah.
And why did you choose those markets to sell?
To some extent, they chose us. The Greenpoint market is Down to Earth Markets, which is a really great, small, independent umbrella organization that organizes markets around New York City. They reached out to us. They're in my neighborhood, actually, in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And it's a really wonderful sort of full diet market. We've got all different vendors there, so you're really able to do your weekly shop. And we really do get a lot of regulars from the neighborhood. Our market at our Long Island City location is actually on the roof. And
the market's on the roof?
Yeah, so it's actually
Cool.
It's us. It's just us doing a farm stand. We sell eggs from a local farm. We sell bread from a local bakery. And occasionally we'll get some apples or some fruit in from the local cooperative but for the most part, it's just our vegetables. And, you know, it's not our busiest market in terms of the amount of product we sell. We do sell a fair amount of merchandise, tote bags, t-shirts, books, a hot sauce, because a lot of the folks visiting are tourists from out of town, so they don't have kitchens in which to cook. But we are growing a pretty solid roster of regulars who shop at that market. And we just can't quit that market. You know, it's just, it's such an important opportunity for folks to come up, experience the farm, look at the plants, see how they're growing, and then purchase the products that, you know, that they're looking at, that are mere feet away. You know, they can jump in and get their hands dirty alongside our farm team on Saturdays. They can take a tour of the farm. They can meet the chickens or watch the bees flitting in and out of the hive. And then they can buy the cucumbers that are being pollinated by those bees. So it's a really cool experience. It's also, you know, I want to be clear that urban farms will never feed entire cities. It is just not practical. We absolutely need the rural farm systems that have been feeding us forever. But therefore the food that we are able to produce, the quantity of food that we're able to produce on urban farms is really a drop in the bucket compared to what we need and what we will need to feed our growing population. And yet I get a huge kick out of the fact that on Saturdays when we have this market, you know, we've got CSA members and market shoppers who are walking over and picking up their vegetables, which are produced, you know, by hand because we don't have tractors up on the roof, and then walking that produce back to their apartment kitchen. So that's food that's making it from seed to plate without ever using an ounce of fossil fuel.
That's awesome. Yeah, what a great experience to offer in like a dense city. It's something in San Diego, we have a lot of farms that are close by, but it would be impractical for us to drive to the farm on a regular basis to get our produce and see the bees and all those things. So it's nice to have something, especially in a city like where you are, and just kind of give those people that experience. And like you said, not having those things driven around. I think that makes a difference, even if it's in smaller quantities.
Yeah.
And then what do you guys do in the off season? Like, I'm imagining.
Is there an off season?
Is there an off season? Yeah. I mean, when does that start and stop? You have to explain to us San Diegans because we're not familiar with such a thing because we're year round.
Well, we're getting snow on Thursday.
Okay.
Okay. That sounds like it'll be a little off.
Yeah. It definitely, I feel a little off. Yeah, I mean, the new weather has been a huge challenge. It has made the gamble that you take every spring just all sorts of confusing. Our season is a moving target and has grown increasingly confusing as the climate changes. But we typically put our first seeds in the ground sometime in April and harvest the last crops. This week was our last harvest, yesterday. So our season is, you know, it's limited. And the off season for us looks like growing microgreens in our greenhouse for chefs. For the most part, in terms of the revenue we're producing on the farm. But we're also really busy during the off season, giving site visits and taking deposits on events. We have weddings up on the farm almost every single Saturday. We have all sorts of workshops that we lead in our office, in our indoor space, all through the winter. I teach a class on modeling an urban ag business. And so, you know, we've always got some sort of activity to which we're selling tickets. And then we do a lot of our design work over the winter. So we're currently, for example, Jacob Javits Convention Center here in New York City is adding an extension onto the center, and it's going to be a building with a 1 acre footprint, and we are building a farm on the roof of that building for them.
That's
Congrats,
great.
that's huge.
Yeah, and think of the exposure that'll get. 'Cause I mean, aside from people who are in New York, so many people come to Jacob Javits every year for conventions from all over.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's really, you know, I mean, that's such a huge part of what we're doing. At the end of the day, you know, there's a limit to how much this concept can scale. You know, I think people want to believe that this is the silver bullet and that if we put farms on every roof around every city that we can fix the food system, you know. And unfortunately, we can't. You know, we're not the solution to every problem, but we can serve as an educational tool, and hopefully an inspiration to others, that, farms might not look like the red barn on their milk carton.
Yeah.
Farms come in all shapes and sizes, but that, knowing your farmer and having a relationship with your farm is a realizable goal in 2018, and that, that these relationships are what build a healthier food system. So yeah, having a farm on a convention center is our dream come true, because it'll allow us to reach new levels of visitors and really spread that message far and wide.
So I saw online, I was looking into your CSA, and I saw you guys have a wait list. So I was wondering how many people do you serve each season with your CSA?
We just scaled it back this year. We discontinued the distribution at our Brooklyn location because our Brooklyn location is inside the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is behind a security gate, and it was a huge hassle. We also had a lot of members who were sending proxies, splitting shares with other families in their neighborhood, sending, their child care providers.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, great, right? It's especially great when they're like, I know the kids don't like kale, so I'll just not take the kale and I'll just take 2 chard instead.
Oh.
And next thing you know, you are out of chard and your other members are complaining. And that gets really challenging. To be honest, running the CSA, it's a lot of work. And as much as I love it, I wrote personally our CSA recipes. I wrote weekly newsletters, and when we had 2 different pickups at our 2 different locations every week, I would write 2 newsletters because we had different crops in each share. And so I was writing 2 weekly newsletters with recipes and, storage tips and all of that. And I loved it, and I would have kept doing it, till the end of time. But managing the folks who are going out of town this weekend, and can we forego our share this weekend and pick up 2 next weekend, it really is challenging. So as a farmer, the dream is to find these institutional shares. We would love to find businesses, who have 100 plus employees, half of whom want to sign up for a CSA share. We can just drop off, 40 shares at their office location or what have you. And send 1 email to all of them.
Right.
Yeah.
The office manager can manage when somebody's out of town for the weekend or what have you. But yeah, it's, the sort of the administrative work that comes along with the CSA program. It's tough. And at the end of the day, what I think the toughest part of it is that we're coming to a point. The way people are sourcing their food these days is making it harder than ever to say no to your customer. If somebody's going out of town for the weekend and they want to forego their CSA pickup but pick up 2 shares next week, and you say no to that, it becomes more tempting than ever for them to stop walking across town and pick up their share and to start subscribing to that Blue Apron box.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. Let's not single out Blue Apron. That meal kit delivery service.
Yeah.
I think we are increasingly finding that the convenience of services like meal kit deliveries, it's really hard to compete with. Here's the thing, though. For a lot of our customers, it's not about convenience. It's about the connection, and it's about the opportunity to visit the farm when they pick up their CSA share. It's about being asked to try new vegetables that they would never buy from our farm stand because they don't know how to use them. And so we find that those are the folks who sign up year after year. So, I think that there's this really deep desire, particularly on the part of urbanites who aren't driving through farmland as part of their daily commute, who don't have the ability to visit farms on a regular basis. I think there's a genuine desire to feel that they are part of a solution and part of a healthier food system. And those are the folks who actually will come out of their way to pick up their farm shares. And those are really the people that we are most excited to serve. So, if we lose a couple folks who prefer the convenience of a meal kit delivery service, so be it. And you know what? If we occasionally we get somebody who does both, who's coming to our CSA pickup and getting a couple of their meals delivered every week. And I think there's room for all of it, because the good news is here in New York City, we've got 8 million mouths to feed. So there's definitely
Right.
Yeah, I imagine for many people living in the city, picking up a CSA is kind of, it's their brush with nature every week or every other week. It's their opportunity to feel as though maybe they're outside of the concrete jungle for a second. That's really cool. So in addition to your CSA and all of the other stuff that Brooklyn Grange does, I noticed that you guys also have a couple of value-added items like hot sauce and honey. And I'm a hot sauce freak.
Partial to hot sauce.
I'm partial to hot sauce. But I was wondering where you produce your hot sauce, or if you do that on site, or if you partner with an off-site kitchen, and how that works out for you guys.
Oh my gosh, we have produced that hot sauce in so many places over the years. So that is a product that's regulated by the Department of Ag and Markets here in New York State. So we do have to produce it in an Ag and Markets inspected kitchen. And so we have been bounced around. I mean, New York City real estate, it's tough. It's a tough market. We've bounced around from kitchen to kitchen. Typically, it's hard to find kitchens that are inspected by Ag and Markets. Most New York City restaurant kitchens are inspected by the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, DOH. So yeah, it's a slightly different certification. But we have found a couple restaurants over the years that are Ag and Markets inspected and that are not, open either for breakfast and lunch, and we're there in the mornings, or they're not open for dinner and we're there at night. But recently we started working with a co-packing facility, and that has made all the difference in the world.
Yep, I know that well.
You need to achieve a certain scale for that to make sense. But once you do, there's really no going back.
Yeah. And so you wholesale the hot sauce too, correct?
That's right, yes.
But you don't wholesale your honey, do you guys?
No, we don't. The reason why is that we just don't produce that much honey, or rather, I should say, our bees don't produce that much honey. So for a long time, we in cities, or at least here in New York City, a lot of the beekeepers felt that we were immune to some of the challenges being faced by beekeepers in rural areas, which is to say our bees were not exposed to as many agricultural chemicals, and therefore they were safe from the vulnerabilities of rural bees. And that seems to no longer be the case. Last winter, I don't know a single beekeeper. Actually, I know one beekeeper. The woman who keeps bees atop the Javits Center did not lose a single hive last winter, but it was, it was very exciting. Most New York City beekeepers that I know lost several hives this past winter. It was a particularly rough one. And, what we're finding is that our urban bees, we're often installing packages that we're having shipped in from rural agricultural areas, and the genetics are the same. Those bees have been exposed over generations to the same agricultural chemicals. And so, as beekeepers, it's our job to be shepherds of these creatures and to create the most optimal conditions that we can that support their success, that allow them to thrive. And so we leave them as much honey as they need to survive a winter. And we will supplement if we see a need to, but our goal is not to feed our bees, sugar water. It's to allow them to feed from their own natural stores. So we tend to be, thank the bees. I mean, they're
that too.
working hard. So we really are pretty conservative with our harvests, and what we do harvest just flies off of our farm stand.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So no pun intended. So we don't have much left. In fact, we are sold out of this year's harvest already.
Wow.
Yeah. So
so why go wholesale pricing when you can get full retail for it and sell out?
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Also, it's just, having that, we really don't, hot sauce and honey are our only value-added products. So for us to have that hot sauce bottle, that jar of honey in the cabinet of our regular farm stand shopper all winter long, it's a constant reminder. Oh, when is Brooklyn Grange coming back to the market? Because some of our market vendors, our fellow market vendors, are at the winter market year round. We're one of the seasonal vendors, and we want them to remember us and to not buy their vegetables at the supermarket that week that we're returning to the market. We want them to, to come and shop with us, or maybe sign up for our CSA share. So we really do, we value having that brand in people's kitchens year round.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point about, using value added as a way to drive customers back to the farmer's market when it's time again, when the season comes.
It's time to go.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, I feel like we could ask you about 50 more questions, but I know time is a thing here. So we're going to kind of wrap up and go with our question of the week here. And hopefully, I know our listeners probably learned a lot from you with our conversation. But for the question for this week is, what kind of food do you produce or would you like to produce in your own urban environment? So I know you probably produce a lot of food in your urban environment, but we can kind of talk about, is there anything that you wish that you grew, or what's your kind of favorite thing that you grow? And then the three of us can say what we grow, but we'll start here and kind of give you a minute to think about it. Kat, what is something that you produce or would like to produce?
Oh, I think you know what I'd like to produce. So I have a dream of being an escargot farmer, and I'm pretty sure I can do that in a reasonably small space. So I'm scoping out my patio. I'm wondering if I could start a small crop here, at least to experiment. There's a great escargot farmer actually in Long Island. So not too far from Anastasia and her group, Peconic Escargot, and they're doing beautiful things with escargot and selling them to a lot of chefs, and you see a lot more escargot dishes on chefs' tables in New York now. So snail, yes, we're going after the escargot farm.
Little tiny electric fences.
That's right, little very short electric fences.
I feel like you could go vertical with something like that, like different layers.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
That's the rooftop thing.
Yeah. a little rooftop. Justine, what's something that you
Okay,
do?
snails aren't really my thing.
No.
But I eat a lot of beans. I'm like, Dave is vegan and I'm like 95% vegetarian. We eat a lot of beans. So I would love to see more beans locally. I know there's some at the market.
There's not much, though. The ones that we have are coming from the Central Coast. You don't see much of anybody in San Diego. And it seems like beans might be a thing because they go very vertical that you could do at an urban farm. So maybe talk to our microgreen folks, tell them to expand.
That'd be awesome.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And you can sprout them too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so they can live on. I was gifted a blueberry bush by my next door neighbor 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago. They were moving out of their place, and they had a really great garden in their backyard, and they were moving to a smaller place, so they gifted me their blueberry bush, and it wasn't blossoming at the time, but then they said, just water it, just keep it like soaked once a week, and then you'll see blueberries in the season. And I think it was about April or May, my kids and I kind of looked over, and it was full of blueberries. And it was so fun because every day when they got home, they'd go check the bush and they'd eat like the 3 blueberries that were ready. And it was just so thrilling for them because I can't grow anything at my house. I have a very brown thumb, but it got me really inspired. I would like to have lots of blueberry bushes and grow things that I eat a lot of, that I buy at the market, like just lettuce, which I've heard is really like dumb easy to grow, and I just have never tried, or like strawberries or tomatoes or things that grow kind of year round and readily here in San Diego. So I do have a garden box in my yard.
That's the first step.
It's sitting there.
I won't comment. I've seen it.
I got the box
It's literally
part.
a box. The dirt even is a little sketchy.
It's dry.
Yes, it's very dry.
But it's, step by step, honey.
In a couple of years, I'll give you guys an update. Anastasia, what's some things that you, what do you produce or what do you like
What I
to...
wish we could produce.
Yeah.
My dream. So we've got this challenge coming up. We're building this third site, and we'll have an indoor events hall and kitchen there, and we'll be producing our own. My personal passion project is the beverage program, and of course, we're very waste focused. So I'm always thinking about producing as little waste as possible and seasonal product. And so the biggest challenge creating a cocktail program in the Northeast is, of course, citrus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if I could magically produce anything, which of course we can't up here on a very, very windy roof that's ice cold much of the time and only has a limited soil depth of about 12 inches. So this really and truly is a pipe
not
dream.
ideal for citrus.
Aren't those the citrus conditions? Yeah, no, the thing I'm most jealous of and the thing I most love when I'm out on the West Coast is all that gorgeous, gorgeous citrus fruit.
We so take that for granted here.
We do.
Yeah.
We do not
everywhere.
give oranges enough respect.
Yes. I kind of think of them as like annoying more like, the orange trees, oranges everywhere. But then, I can see how other people would be envious of such a thing.
Right.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. I'm sure our listeners really got a lot out of hearing about you, and your program is just so unique and wonderful, and I love it.
I am so excited to join you for Intense. I am looking forward to it immensely, and just really excited to be out in the Intense community.
And,
So
I'm just guessing that being in San Diego in February isn't such a bad thing when you're from New York, right?
Yeah, and isn't it citrus season?
It's citrus season here. Yeah, you'll have so
here.
much citrus.
We'll make sure we have plentiful citrus for you.
That's
here.
right.
I will pack an extra suitcase.
Excellent.
There you go.
All right, thanks so much, Anastasia. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks for listening along. Please leave us a review on iTunes and tell us how you liked today's episode. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss our next one. And if you want more farmers market tips, you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter at intensebusiness.com and follow us on Instagram at intensebusiness. That's INTENTS business. Anastasia will be presenting at the Intense Conference about audience engagement as a means for increasing traffic to farmers markets. The 2019 Intense Conference will be held in San Diego, February 24th through 26th. Anastasia will be there. Will you?
This podcast is produced by Intense Business, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni-Mead. Original music by David Mead. Special thanks to our guest, Anastasia Plakias in San Diego Markets.